Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when getting the sniffles could actually get you a funeral. The year is something vaguely medieval. Let's say the 1340s, and you're curled up under a straw mattress that smells faintly of goat and regret. Your nose is running, your throat is sore, and somewhere outside, someone is loudly coughing their last into the foggy morning air. You're not panicking, yet. But you are cold. A kind of creeping, marrow-deep cold that no amount of scratchy wool seems to fix. You'd kill for a mug of something warm, but your household ran out of mead last week, and boiled water tastes like the inside of an iron pot. There's no thermometer, no tissue box, no cozy soup commercials. Just you, your snot, and the dawning realization that people around here do not take a mild fever lightly. Last week, the miller's nephew sneezed, and now the village priest is planting herbs around his grave. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up, a mistake, because your head promptly starts pounding like someone is hammering a pot over your ears. You lie back down. That ain't because of no other din. Since real doors are for people with castles, your younger cousin scampers past yelling something about a healer in the next village over. You sincerely hope that's not a euphemism for the guy who waves chicken bones and yells at clouds. In medieval Europe, getting sick wasn't a private affair. It was more like a neighborhood event. As your sniffles evolve into shivers, relatives begin drifting in. Someone pokes your forehead. Someone else mutters that you're either cursed or just lazy. The local wise woman, who smells like sage and onions, is summoned. She nods gravely and says, "A humoral imbalance. Too much cold and damp in the spleen. You didn't even know you had a spleen." She prescribes hot compresses, boiled nettle tea, and sleeping with a dried hedgehog under your pillow. You protest, but quietly. The last person who complained now lives in the chicken shed. Meanwhile, let's talk about the house. It's not exactly sterile. The floor is packed dirt, with a faint whiff of manure wafting in from the pig pen just outside. The air inside is heavy, with wood smoke, burnt turnip, and damp wool. Windows are tiny slits, mostly shut to keep the ill winds out, which unfortunately also keeps the air in, including your own coughs, moans, and the occasional fart from your granduncle sleeping 2 feet away. A fire burns low in the hearth. That's your only source of heat, and it's not really cooperating. Every time you cough, a puff of soot jumps out like it's also annoyed by your presence. In the background, your cousin has returned, this time holding what looks like a dead frog and some string. The healer says to tie this to your ankle. You sigh. Not because you're skeptical, it's the Middle Ages, everyone is skeptical, but because you're too tired to argue with frog-based medicine. By nightfall, things have escalated. Your fever spikes, and you begin mumbling incoherently about oxen wearing bonnets and the sky tasting of vinegar. This delights the healer, who declares it a classic sign of bad blood and spiritual congestion. The treatment, bloodletting. You weakly object. She says, "Don't worry, it's just a little nick." Moments later, you're staring at a small bowl slowly filling with your own blood while someone recites Psalm 91 backwards. At this point your odds aren't great, but weirdly enough, you're starting to feel sleepy. Possibly from the blood loss, possibly from the minty herb sheep fat concoction they smeared on your temples. You close your eyes, listening to the crackling fire, the low murmur of worried voices, and the occasional groan from a neighbor, also dying next door. It's a symphony of misery, but oddly soothing in its consistency. And just as your fevered dreams start to spiral into visions of a talking goose in a knight's helmet, someone tucks the rough wool blanket a little higher on your chest. It's not much, but in the medieval world, a little warmth goes a long way. The next morning begins with an abrupt splash. Someone has thrown cold water on your face. Not gently. It's not the refreshing sprinkle of a spa treatment. More like a startled bucket, dumped in panic. You sputter awake, blinking through tangled hair and sopping linens. Above you hovers the concerned face of your older cousin, who looks like she hasn't slept and is holding the now empty bucket, with the same reverence a knight might give a sacred sword. "Good," she mutters. "Still alive. Barely. Your skin feels clammy, your limbs are made of lead, and your breath tastes like stale onion porridge. But more alarming is the fact that your entire body smells faintly of vinegar and rosemary. Apparently, sometime during the night, the village healer, or possibly an enthusiastic neighbor, decided to preserve you like a side of beef. Your mother peers in next, carrying a tray with something steaming. It's not food. It's a poultice, made of boiled moss, mashed garlic, and a generous dose of what may be candle wax. She smears it across your chest, while humming a hymn about divine healing and not complaining. You remain silent because your throat has staged a full rebellion. Every swallow feels like you're gargling gravel. Someone offers you a soothing drink, made of warm ale, thyme, and a whisper of honey. You accept because your standards are now subterranean. By mid-morning, the diagnosis is in. The village has spoken. The illness you have is clearly chest fire, an ailment that requires frequent spitting, long prayers, and unfortunately for you, regular application of leeches. You try to protest, but your voice comes out as a squeaky cough. The decision stands. Now comes the leeching. A clay pot is brought in, squirming ominously. Inside are 5 thumb-sized leeches, slick, shiny, and apparently very excited to meet you. You stir, told they draw the poison out. You're also told not to scream, as it can frighten the leeches. No one is quite clear on what happens when a leech is startled, but you're in no mood to find out. One by one, they are applied to your chest, arms, even your neck. It's a strange sensation. Cool, then itchy, then an odd rhythmic tugging, like you're being kissed by a tiny, overly enthusiastic octopus. You lie still, too tired to argue, too sick to run. Leech therapy was common in the Middle Ages, based on the theory of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. It was believed most illnesses were caused by an excess of one. Blood, ironically, was often the prime suspect. Hence, the leeches, physicians, well, more often barbers or monks with time on their hands, use them for everything, from fevers to headaches, to just looking a bit off. But here's the kicker. These weren't trained professionals. The woman applying the leeches to your body is also the village butter churner. To distract yourself, you glance at the room. It's dim, still smoky from the fire, with tapestries fluttering slightly in the breeze from the broken window shutter. You count 3 chickens wandering freely indoors. One of them pecks idly at your discarded boot. Your younger sibling sits cross-legged by your bedside, solemnly reciting a poem they claim wards off demons. You don't argue. The line between medicine and magic in your world is thinner than the walls of this house. Hours pass. The leeches, now bloated and sluggish, are gently removed and tossed into the garden. You hope they don't find their way back in. A fresh poultice is applied. This one smells like damp hay and mint, and you're told to rest, which is difficult, because the bells of the local chapel begin tolling again and again. Each peal echoes through your skull like a medieval drumline. Outside, someone is yelling about turnip prices. Somewhere else, a cow has wandered into the well. Life continues around your sickness, indifferent and noisy. As the sun dips low, the healer returns. She brings with her a brass pendulum and insists on swinging it over your head to balance your vibrations. You don't know what that means, but you're too tired to blink, let alone object. Still too much phlegm, she sighs, peering into your mouth like she's inspecting a loaf of suspicious bread. We'll try mustard seeds and sheep's milk in the morning. You nod weakly, or maybe that's just your neck giving up. Outside, night falls fast. The fire is stoked again, casting flickering shadows that dance like sleepy ghosts across the walls. Someone hums softly in the corner. You drift in and out, caught between sleep and fever, hearing snippets of conversation about saints, signs, and whether or not your illness came from stepping on the wrong kind of moss. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers truly believed in some of these folk cures, or if it was just a way of doing something, anything, when faced with the helpless mystery of disease. For you, the patient, it doesn't matter. In this moment, as you shiver under heavy wool and strange herbs, you don't crave logic. You crave peace. And maybe, if you're lucky, one dreamless night. By the third day, things are not better, not worse, either, just different. You wake up to someone smearing mashed onions on your feet. There's no explanation. No one makes eye contact. Your cousin is quietly sobbing into a bundle of lavender, and a neighbor is praying in Latin, despite clearly not knowing any Latin. It's just the same 3 syllables repeated over and over with dramatic hand gestures. The healer has returned, this time with a basket of new treatments she insists are all the rage in the next village over. These include a hot stone wrapped in cabbage leaves, a dried fish bladder to wear around your neck, and a mixture of goat's milk and soot to be applied internally. You don't ask how. It's around this time that the household begins preparing for what they politely call either recovery or release. Your bed is moved closer to the fire. Someone brings fresh rushes to scatter on the dirt floor. A visiting monk is summoned to chant over you, just in case. He's clearly more interested in your bread rations than your soul, but you appreciate the company. And then comes the ritual of fumigation, which is just a fancy word for smoke everything and hope the evil spirits choke first. They burn rosemary, sage, thyme, and what might be an old shoe. The room fills with a thick herbal haze that makes you sneeze, which everyone takes as a promising sign. Let's pause and talk medieval medicine for a second. Real doctors do exist in this time, mostly in large cities or near universities, and mostly for people who can afford things like soap and dowries. But even those doctors are often working with texts written centuries earlier, combining Greek philosophy, Roman bathhouse wisdom, and a healthy dose of astrological guesswork. The average village patient? They rely on a chaotic mix of superstition, community memory, and whatever the nearest monk remembers from a scroll he once skimmed by candlelight. You, for example, are now being treated with a 4 elements balancing diet. This means alternating between cold porridge, earth, hot wine, fire, mint leaves, air, and water drawn at exactly sunrise, water. There is no logic. There is only tradition. Your grandmother stops by and declares, with ominous finality, You just need to sweat it out. Then she proceeds to wrap you in every available blanket, stack firewood nearby, and place a hot brick at your feet. You resemble a poorly wrapped burrito, a sweaty, feverish burrito who is actively hallucinating about dancing turnips. As the room grows stifling, your mind begins to wander. You remember being healthier, barefoot summers chasing chickens, autumn nights by the fire, your cousin falling into a barrel of ale last spring. Back then, sickness felt like something that happened to others. Now, it clings to you like a second skin. And yet, part of you is adjusting. You begin to recognize the sounds of this sick room, the pop of logs, the rustle of dried herbs, the quiet murmurs of people praying just outside the curtain. You even start to find comfort in them. Not because you feel better, because they feel familiar. Occasionally, the healer checks your balance. This involves poking your belly, inspecting your tongue, and once tying a string around your middle finger and waiting for a sign. What kind of sign? She never explains. She just stares until someone sneezes, then says, "Ah, there it is." She tries cupping next, heating small glass or horn bowls and placing them on your back to draw out the chill. Insimus. Other draws out a high-pitched yelp, but you are told this means it's working. Fun fact, cupping has been around for centuries and still exists today. Some modern athletes swear by it. Back then, though, there were no clean edges or trained hands, just fire, guesswork, and the faint smell of scorched flesh. By late afternoon, a young boy arrives from a neighboring village with the latest cure. It's a scroll written in bad Latin, advising the consumption of boiled owl. There's a lively debate about whether the owl should be fresh or dried. No one considers asking you. Thankfully, owls are hard to catch, so they pivot instead to horseradish tea. It burns your throat like liquid lightning, but it also clears your sinuses for 10 glorious minutes. A small win. That night, someone begins singing. It's an old lullaby, sung badly, but sweetly. The words are about cows and moonlight, but the melody is lopsided, full of unexpected pauses. You drift to sleep, halfway through a verse about a pig who wants to be a baker. Your dreams are strange. You're standing in a sunlit meadow full of sheep dressed as monks. One of them offers you a scroll that turns into a pancake. You're about to eat it when a giant leech wearing a crown interrupts, declaring itself king of phlegm. You wake up confused, sweaty, and oddly hungry. The fire's burned low. The room is quiet. No more chanting, no more leech juggling, no more steam. Just the soft breath of sleeping family nearby, and a sense subtle but real, that maybe your fever has peaked, or maybe the hallucinations are just getting better at pretending to be real. Either way, the worst might be over. The fourth day begins. Not with dread, but with a bowl of warm broth that actually smells edible. It's a shocking development. You open your crusty eyelids to find your aunt proudly holding a chipped wooden bowl. "Goat bone and barley," she says, beaming as if she served royal fare. It's thin, a little gray, and tastes mildly of old spoon. But it's the first thing you've swallowed in days that doesn't immediately try to escape again. There is spies, the sky is murky. The village still quiet. Inside, the healer has returned yet again, though this time she doesn't bring leeches, fish bladders, or any fresh herbs. She just watches you eat with a strangely satisfied nod, like she's done all the work herself. You notice she has a new amulet around her neck, made from what looks suspiciously like one of your fallen molars. You decide not to ask. You're still feverish. But something has shifted. Your limbs ache less. Your breathing has settled into wheezy but functional. And when your little sibling sneezes directly into your porridge, you flinch, which must be a good sign. Today's medical focus: recovery rituals, and you're in for a treat. First, you're instructed to spit into a clay bowl and bury it under the largest rock you can find. This is to trap the illness in the earth. No one explains why it works. You don't care. You just want it to be over. Next comes the ceremonial sweeping of sickness. This involves your grandmother slowly sweeping around your bed with a bundle of dried birch twigs while muttering old rhymes. It's like being haunted by a very tidy ghost. You try not to laugh. Laughter, as you've learned, triggers coughing, and coughing triggers another round of garlic ointment. Then a chicken is brought in. Not for eating. Oh no, this is a diagnostic chicken. Apparently, if it pecks at the left side of your bed first, you'll recover. If it chooses the right side, well, best not to dwell on that. The chicken is released. It walks in a circle, poops by the fireplace, and leaves. Everyone declares that auspicious. Feeling bold, you ask for water. Clean water. This request is met with nervous glances. Clean is a relative concept. Eventually, someone hands you a cup of boiled river water that smells faintly of moss and optimism. You drink it. It's fine. You've consumed worse. You spend the afternoon propped up on a pillow made of hay and despair, watching a moth trace lazy spirals near the ceiling beams. A neighbor visits and offers you a miracle walnut, which, she claims, was once blessed by a saint's uncle. You accept it graciously, pocket it, and immediately forget where you put it. This, too, is a kind of healing. You're allowed to sit by the fire for a while. This is a huge promotion, from deathbed to hearth-sitter. You're wrapped in a heavy cloak and surrounded by people who now treat you like someone who nearly left and decided to turn around. They bring you small things: half an apple, a comb, a piece of honeycomb still stuck with beeswax, and they talk. They tell you of other sicknesses, other winters, of the time the village midwife accidentally cured a fever by confusing nettles with wild mint, of a boy who once hallucinated himself into a tree and stayed there for 3 days before realizing he wasn't a squirrel. Historians still argue whether these tales were remembered for comfort or simply entertainment. But in this world, stories are the closest thing to medicine you have after broth and hope. Someone plays a lute. Badly. It's more tuning than music, but it's peaceful. As evening falls, you're led back to bed, under protest. But your legs are still rubbery, and your head feels like it's filled with soggy wool. A final ritual is performed. The laying of warm stones along your spine, said to seal the recovery. You're not sure what that means, but it feels nice. Before sleep, your mother leans in and whispers, "No dreams tonight. Let the soul stay home." She kisses your forehead and pulls the scratchy wool up under your chin. The fire crackles low. Someone outside is softly singing again, something about a fox who married a duck. You let your eyes close. The worst may not be fully behind you, but the turn has begun. In the Middle Ages, this is what healing looks like: sweat, superstition, stories, and the slow return of appetite. Tomorrow might bring fresh fever, or maybe just another bowl of broth. But tonight, you sleep, and the chicken doesn't return. The morning is quiet, and for once, your face isn't slick with sweat. No one wakes you with a bucket of water. No one is chanting over your limbs or waving a turnip stalk in rhythmic circles. It's almost suspiciously normal. You blink up at the rafters and realize that, for the first time in days, your skull does not feel like a tightly bound cider barrel. There's a dull ache. Yes, But you've come to accept that as your new baseline. What really grabs your attention is the subtle absence of misery. Today, you are on the mend. You even hear someone say so, which is as good as a royal decree in your condition. And that means, unfortunately, it's time to get out of bed. Not for long. You're still swaddled in blankets, looking like a depressed burrito. But your caretakers have decided a brief stroll in the courtyard will reconnect you with life. It's a grand statement for what turns out to be a wobbly 3-minute shuffle past the goose pen. Still, the sun is shining. A bird is yelling. A pig walks by with a smug expression. These are all good signs. As you sit on a wooden stool, sun on your face and wool blanket around your shoulders like some sickly medieval wizard, people begin to stop by. The first is the blacksmith's daughter, who brings you a small loaf of honey bread and says nothing. She just leaves it on your lap and scurries off. Then comes the old monk, now slightly drunk, who gives you a rock. Just a rock. It looked healing, he says. You nod politely. Rocks are free. Healing is subjective. Soon you are surrounded by a small accidental crowd. They're not really there for you. They're here for the event of your not death. People love a recovery story. You hear someone tell a friend, "I knew he'd pull through. He had that look." You're not sure what look they mean. Probably not the one where you mistook a cabbage for a priest 2 days ago. But your return to health also brings responsibility. The village, seeing you vertical again, immediately finds uses for you. Light chores, sweeping, fetching water, moving rocks that may or may not be bad luck. Rocks. You're not thrilled, but you're still too weak to resist. And honestly, you're glad to be outside. Let's pause here and talk about convalescence in the medieval world. There's no such thing as sick leave or rest days. The concept of full recovery is nebulous at best. Once you're not actively dying or contagious, you're considered functional. Congratulations, back to work. Many medieval illnesses left lingering effects, persistent coughs, joint pain, mysterious bouts of vapors. These were often chalked up to spiritual residue or lingering imbalance in the humors. You might be offered more garlic or more prayer, sometimes both, rubbed together. But few people had the luxury of actual rest. Survival required effort, and so the half-healed returned to their fields, their fires, their children. You, for example, are soon asked to help stir the communal stew. It's an honor. It's also exhausting. You try, you genuinely do. But by mid-afternoon you're slumped on a bench watching a chicken eat a beetle, wondering if it's normal to feel this tired after just standing up. Someone hands you a drink. Not wine, not tea. It's something else, thick, greenish, and strangely fizzy. They say, it's fermented nettle tonic. You take a sip. It tastes like grass and punishment. You smile weakly. The rest of the day is quiet. You sit in the sun. You doze. A passing bard strums a lyre that's missing 2 strings and sings a ballad about a knight who falls in love with his own reflection. You're too tired to care about the metaphors. And then, just before twilight, it happens. A child runs up to you, eyes wide, and says, "Are you the one who came back from the brink?" You nod, somewhat theatrically. She gasps and runs off again, presumably to tell someone else. You're a legend now. Or at least a mildly interesting rumor. As you're led back inside that evening, wrapped again in scratchy wool, and accompanied by a gently snoring goose who has adopted you, there's a certain satisfaction in simply being here. The fire burns. Someone has boiled turnips again, and the smell is, well, it's something, but you're no longer confined to the fog of illness. You're among the living. And that, in the Middle Ages, is a feat worth celebrating. Tonight, the healer returns, not with potions or smoke or beetles in a pouch, but with a stool and a story. You've survived the first wave, she says, sitting down beside the hearth. But now comes the real danger. Overconfidence. You blink, mid-sip of weak onion broth. Overconfidence. She nods solemnly. Many a fool has danced too early and paid the price. Healing isn't sit just not dying, is sit learning not to die again. And so begins your 6th day, not sick, but still very much trapped in the strange gray area between health and vulnerability. You feel mostly fine, but your legs ache when you walk too long, and if you laugh too hard, your lungs wheeze like a set of broken bagpipes. You're told not to exert yourself, which, in theory, sounds restful, but in practice, it means helping with the livestock. Gently, lovingly. With no lifting, bending, or sneezing near the goats. You're assigned to supervise the hens, which mostly involves watching chickens judge you silently as they chase each other, for reasons unknown. Still, it's better than being bedridden. Mid-morning brings a visitor, a traveling peddler who claims to sell recovery charms. He opens his coat to reveal a dizzying array of trinkets. Bird skulls, carved pebbles, and one piece of string he insists was touched by a bishop. You trade him half a turnip for a small wooden frog. He says it brings intestinal peace. You're not sure what that means, but your gut has been making ominous gurgles all morning, so you keep it close. As the day warms, someone suggests a cleansing walk. You're escorted to the village edge, near the creek that runs by the old mill. Here, you're asked to stand barefoot in the shallows for exactly 5 minutes while reciting something that vaguely resembles a poem. The water is freezing. The poem rhymes toad with ode and ye old cold, but the villagers seem pleased. Cleansing rituals like this were common across Europe. Many communities believed in sick airs and troubled waters, natural forces that could be lured away or pacified by symbolic acts. Standing in a stream was thought to draw out lingering bad humors. If your toes turned blue, that just meant it was working. You survived the creek, barely. Back in the village, the healer performs a post-fever inspection. This involves sniffing your breath, tapping your knees, and asking if you've dreamed of foxes or fires recently. You lie and say no. You have been dreaming about riding a cabbage into battle. But you're not ready to unpack that. She gives you a tiny cloth bag filled with dried lavender and mustard seed. For the pillow, she explains. Keeps the dreams calm. You thank her, though your current dreams mostly involve turnip monsters and leeches demanding back pay. Evening approaches, and you begin to notice something peculiar. Your appetite is returning. Not in the heroic, I could eat a whole ox way, but more like that old bread doesn't look entirely evil. You chew slowly, savoring each bite of slightly burnt grain and mystery cheese. It's not delicious, but it's real, solid food, and that's something. Your mother beams. Your uncle offers you an extra chunk of boiled beet. Your goat, still unnamed, rests its chin on your knee, like you've been blessed by some pastoral deity. And then someone suggests a prayer of thanks, not to any particular saint or deity. Just a murmured phrase spoken around the fire. We saw the edge, and we came back. You find yourself repeating it, not because you understand all its layers, but because it feels right. Later, curled beneath your ever-itchy wool blankets, you notice the room is quieter. Not just in volume, but in energy. No chanting, no rush of boiling water, no clattering of leech jars. Just soft breathing. the occasional snore, the sound of the hearth settling into glowing coals. You place the wooden frog beside your pillow, not out of belief, but out of comfort. Healing is slow, messy, unpredictable. In the Middle Ages, it was never guaranteed. But tonight, wrapped in the scratchy warmth of the not quite well, you feel like maybe, just maybe, you've outlived the worst. And that is no small thing. It's now the 7th day, and you've been declared fully upright. Not fully recovered. Not exactly healthy, just upright. In medieval terms, that means 2 feet on the ground, no longer actively leaking from your face, and capable of carrying a bucket of water without tipping into the well. You're still coughing now and then, but in the subtle, polite way that says, "Yes, I was recently unwell. Please offer me something boiled and bland." Today, your household begins the process of ritual reintegration. That's a fancy way of saying, "Congratulations, now go clean the pigsty." But first, there is the formal burning of the sickness straw. You watch from a safe distance as the old bedding, the straw mattress you've been sweating into for the better part of a week, is hauled outside and ceremonially set on fire. Smoke billows upward in a strangely satisfying cloud of disease, dreams, and desperation. The healer stands nearby, arms crossed, nodding. Someone plays a single note on a flute. It's unclear if it was on purpose. This act, though dramatic, isn't just theatrical. In many medieval communities, the idea of illness as a clinging physical residue meant that fabrics, bedding, even entire rooms were sometimes ritually cleansed, if not by soap, then by smoke and fire. Anything the sick person touched too long might hold the illness. The logic: better to burn a mattress than bury a family. You're led back inside to a clean bed, which looks suspiciously like the old bed, just rotated 90 degrees and spritzed with mint water. Still, it smells nicer. And the blanket no longer feels like it's plotting against you. There's a lightness in the house now. People speak louder. Laughter returns. Someone starts baking. The smell of browning oats and roasted carrots fills the air, and you momentarily forget you're living in a world with no anesthesia, no plumbing, and very judgmental sheep. But your illness isn't quite done with you. It's now entered its final phase, the lecture circuit. One by one, every older relative you've ever avoided sidles up to deliver their version of what you must learn from this. The topics vary: sin, sanitation, sleeping with socks on, the importance of not angering saints by swearing near ponds. You nod through them all, sipping watery broth like a scholar too wise to interrupt. Midday brings a visitor, the village scribe. He's carrying a small book and a quill made from a crow feather. He's heard of your survival and wishes to record it for the local chronicles. Not because you're famous, but because you lasted more than 5 days without dying, and that's worth noting. You agree, modestly. He writes down your name, coughs politely, then forgets the last letter and makes something up. He also records the dreams you had while feverish, which you fabricate wildly. You tell him about a talking eel named Maurice who tried to sell you soup in the shape of the moon. He nods seriously. Yes, that matches the signs. Scholars today still debate whether medieval dream interpretations actually influenced treatment or were simply a way of injecting mystery into otherwise confusing recoveries. Either way, you now exist in the local record as the one who outdreamed death. In the afternoon, someone organizes a small welcome-back meal. It's modest: barley stew, dried apples, a suspiciously green cheese, but it's warm, and the company is good. Children run in circles. Your aunt tells a story about a time she sneezed so hard she fell off a ladder. You laugh, carefully. Then someone asks the big question. What do you remember? You pause. You could talk about the leeches, the sweat, the goat that kept licking your face during your worst fever, but instead, you talk about the fire, the quiet, the comfort of voices you recognized, even when you couldn't see. You say, "It felt like floating through smoke." And then someone pulled me back. No one responds, but everyone nods. They've heard that before. As the sky dims into twilight, you find yourself walking again. This time alone, just a short path past the apple trees. The air smells like damp wood and cinnamon. You spot a spider spinning a slow, deliberate web on a fence post. You stop to watch it for a while. Recovery, it seems, is a bit like that spider. Delicate, slow, oddly graceful. Invisible progress that only makes sense when you pause and look back. You return home. As the stars begin to prick the sky, someone has fluffed your new old bed. The room is quiet. The coals glow softly. The frog charm has been moved to the shelf beside a sprig of dried rosemary. And as you climb under the wool blanket, still itchy, still slightly damp in places, you realize something. You are alive. And in the Middle Ages, that's enough of a miracle to sleep on. This morning, you wake to the sound of bread being slapped around. Not aggressively, just the gentle rhythm of dough meeting a floured board, again and again. Your aunt is baking. Your uncle is arguing with the goat, as usual. Someone outside is yelling about onions. It's all comfortingly loud in that way only a recovered household can be. You stretch. It's not graceful, but it happens. Your limbs creak like a neglected gate. But nothing collapses. For the first time in over a week, you feel something close to normal. And then comes breakfast. Boiled barley, a bit of yesterday's honey bread, and shockingly, an egg. A real egg. You hold it like it's made of gold. You eat it, slowly, reverently, and without sharing. The village healer walks by and says something about building back the juices. You nod and keep chewing. But just as you begin to truly relax, the healer stops and frowns. She asks a question that makes your stomach clench. Have you cleansed your shadow yet? You blink. Your shadow, she explains, during illness. It's not only the body that weakens, but the shadow, your invisible double, your soul's cloak, the echo that walks beside you. If it remains stained, you could fall sick again. Or worse, attract wayward spirits who smell weakness like bees smell jam. Thus begins the shadow cleansing ritual. You're told to fast until midday. Not difficult, your stomach's still suspicious of solid food. Then you're led to the edge of the village, where a pit has been dug. It's shallow, lined with fragrant herbs, and a few pebbles arranged in a vaguely spiraling pattern. You're told to sit at its edge. Remove one sock, just one, and spit into the pit while saying your name backwards. This is all extremely confusing, but you comply. Next, your head is brushed with a broom made of goose feathers and wild fennel. This is meant to sweep away the dream residue of illness. You suppress laughter. The healer swats you with the broom and insists that shadows don't like mockery. For the finale, you must walk in a slow circle while holding a damp cloth soaked in vinegar and rosewater. You feel ridiculous. You smell ridiculous. But the villagers clap softly when you're done, and someone gives you a radish. It's considered lucky. This isn't an unusual day for a medieval patient. Across the continent, post-illness rituals varied wildly by region and tradition. Some involved baths in milk. Others required burning one's old hair, or whispering your fears into a hollowed gourd and throwing it in a stream. The idea wasn't just medical. It was spiritual, social, symbolic. You weren't just healing a body. You were reweaving yourself into the world. By mid-afternoon, you're officially reaccepted. People touch your arm again. Children let you join their games. A neighbor asks for your opinion on the weather. You feel in a very subtle way, whole, but healing brings something else too. Stories. People want to know everything. What did you see? What did you feel? Did you walk with the ancestors? Did your fever dreams mean something? You say maybe. You say, there was a tunnel of wind that sang in Latin, and a goat-shaped cloud that asked you riddles. You say, maybe you saw your great-grandmother, but she was holding a leek and looked annoyed. They gasp. They nod. A few take notes in the margins of old hymnals. That evening, a small group gathers for what they call the circle of retelling. It's exactly what it sounds like. People sit in a circle and tell stories of sickness, survival, and the occasional case of mistaken haunting. One woman tells of a time she swallowed a spider to stop a fever. A man recalls a dream where he had to apologize to a walnut. Someone else insists their recovery only began once they forgave a chicken. Everyone listens. No one laughs. Your story is last. You keep it simple. You say, I was sick. I stayed. I came back. There's a pause. Someone sighs softly. Someone else nods too hard and spills their soup. As the group disperses and you return to your hearth, you realize something that the fever never taught you, but the healing has already. In this world, survival isn't just biology, it's belonging. And tonight, as you slide beneath a cleanish blanket, full of egg and radish, and a strange pride in having walked in a vinegar circle, you understand why these people burn straw and whisper to shadows. They're not just afraid of dying, they're practicing, together, what it means to stay alive. This morning, you're given a stick. Not just any stick. This one is carved with spirals, wrapped at one end with a strip of blue cloth, and handed to you with great ceremony by your grandmother. It's Sep's walking stick, she says, for strength and for whacking chickens if they get too bold. You are, officially, on your first walk beyond the village since falling ill. The healer insists it's good for the humors. Let the wind shake out your leftover ghosts, she says, tying a sprig of sage to your belt for added ghost protection. You're less concerned about ghosts and more concerned about your knees, which still feel like they've been filled with lukewarm porridge. You take your time. The path leads through soft mud and past low stone walls, down toward the small stream that marks the edge of what your village considers safe to wander. There, under a tree that has definitely seen better seasons, you sit on a mossy rock and rest your bones. The air smells like damp earth and cow. But there's bird song, and that counts for something. As you rest, a group of children approaches, led by your younger cousin, who is carrying a suspiciously large beet. They ask you to explain what happened. Not the fever, the battle. What battle? They whisper, excitedly, the one in your dreams. With the turnip knights and the eel wizard. You sigh. One fever-induced bedtime tale, and now you're a local legend. But because it's easier than correcting them, you tell a new story of the brave Cabbage who led a rebellion against the Garlic King. They gasp. They take notes. One child declares they will write a play about it, and just like that, your illness has become folklore. Medieval societies were deeply oral in nature. Stories weren't just entertainment, they were memory, morality, medicine, and magic rolled into one. When someone survived illness, their tale became communal property. It was shared, embellished, repeated, until no one quite remembered what was true and what was metaphor, which, in a way, made it all true. When you return to the village, you're met with nods, smiles, and oddly, a painted stone that someone leaves on your doorstep. It has a crooked goat drawn on it. You don't ask why. But with this new fame comes an unexpected side effect: responsibility. Someone invites you to sit in on a healing circle for another villager who's just fallen ill. You're not the patient this time. You're the witness. A sort of honorary member of the I Didn't Die club. You're asked to share your wisdom. You stand, clear your throat, and say, "Don't lick the herbs unless you're sure they're herbs." This is received as profound. The rest of the evening is spent reciting prayers, telling stories, and sipping something that tastes like hot rainwater. You pass the walking stick to the patient. It's symbolic. And also they need help standing. You don't mention the chicken whacking claws. Later, back home, your mother shows you a piece of parchment. It's a rough drawing, a kind of recovery chart, a circle with symbols: fire fever, wind dreams, stone return to strength, and bread reconnection with the world. Your name is at the center, misspelled but enthusiastic. This is your legacy now. You're not just someone who was sick. You're none who came through, and in a world without doctors, without charts, without anything resembling modern understanding, you are now a reference point. People will point and say, "Remember when they survived." You can too. As you settle into bed that night, you notice something's changed. Your pillow no longer smells like vinegar. Your chest no longer rattles when you breathe. Your legs still ache, yes, but it's the ache of use, not defeat. And beside your bed, leaning casually against the wall, is your stick. Spiral, carved, blue-wrapped, waiting for whatever tomorrow brings. Whether it's another story, another sick room, or just another beat-wielding child, you'll be ready. This morning arrives with fog curling over the fields, and a kind of hush in the air, as if the world has temporarily forgotten how to be loud. You wake slowly, feeling a little more like yourself, and a little more like someone who might someday be able to lift a full bucket without seeing stars. Today's task isn't physical, though. Today, you're to make an offering. You're not sick anymore. But that doesn't mean the spirits who might have wanted you sick are satisfied. There are debts to settle, unseen balances to restore. Or, as your aunt puts it, you owe the other side a small snack. And so begins the offering at the stream. A tradition your village observes quietly, with just enough solemnity to make it feel important, and just enough food involved to make it feel tolerable. You're given a small basket, a slice of bread, a wedge of cheese, 3 dried gooseberries, and a single white feather. These aren't for you. These are for the wind, the water, the gods, or whichever force pulled you back across the veil. Be polite, your grandmother warns, but don't overdo it. Spirits get nervous if you try too hard. You walk alone this time, slowly to the small stream where a flat rock juts out just far enough to look ceremonial. The ground is damp. Birds scatter when you arrive. You lay the food out carefully, muttering the words you were told. For those who watched me from shadows, I return what I can. For those who waited, thank you. For those who warned, next time be louder. Then you toss the feather into the water. It floats for a long time before vanishing under a ripple. You take that as a sign. A good one. Or at least, not obviously bad. In medieval belief, illness wasn't always random. It was often seen as a consequence of imbalance, of sin, of spiritual sloppiness. The offering wasn't just to say thank you. It was a way of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, you'd been noticed by something more. Back at home, people greet you with quiet nods. No big celebration. Just a warm seat by the fire and a second helping of stew. You've paid your dues. You're cleared. You're clean. Or mostly clean. The healer stops by after dinner, saying she wants to check your echo. This, it turns out, involves standing very still while she snaps her fingers around your ears and listens for something. She frowns, snaps again, then declares your echo mildly tilted, but not dangerously inverted. You pretend to understand. To compensate, she gives you a tiny wax seal, shaped like a snail, and tells you to keep it in your left shoe for 7 days. You nod solemnly and immediately forget which shoe is your left. As the evening fades into soft candlelight, you're visited by an unexpected guest, the village carpenter. He's older, always smells faintly of varnish, and rarely speaks. But tonight, he brings you a gift, a small, hand-carved token. It's a simple image, just a figure curled under a blanket, with what looks like steam or breath rising above. On the back is a mark that might be your initials, if your name was Bwig. He says nothing, just hands it over, nods, and leaves. You hold it for a long while. In this world, without hospitals or written prescriptions or sterile sheets, this is what healing looks like. Food left by streams, feathers offered to wind, carved tokens passed hand to hand. The rituals may be strange, but they're consistent. And in a life full of uncertainty, consistency feels like medicine. Later, as you prepare for bed, your cousin asks, "Do you think you'll get sick again?" You don't answer right away. You think about the water, the feather, the dreams, the stone pit, the smell of garlic and vinegar, the goat who never left your side, the echo, mildly tilted but still echoing. And finally, you say, "Probably, but not tomorrow." It's not a promise, but it's something. It's your 11th day post-sickness, and this morning you're being taken to church. Not because you're especially pious, not even because you asked, but because, according to ancient village wisdom, your soul needs to be restitched to heaven after a brush with whatever shadow realm you just came from. It's not about religion so much as alignment, like realigning the wheels on a very wobbly cart that recently crashed into a swamp. The church is small, damp, and smells of candle wax, wet stone, and old linen. The priest, who's half-deaf and perpetually squinting, doesn't recognize you at first, but once someone whispers, "He's the one who sweated for 4 days," the priest nods sagely and waves you forward. You are asked to kneel. You do so slowly, joints popping like kindling. The priest places a cold hand on your forehead and murmurs a few words about gratitude and not wasting your second chance. Then he offers you a sprig of yew. You're not sure what to do with it. You nod anyway. Then comes the surprising part, the test of breath. You're handed a thin piece of parchment and asked to blow on it. If it flutters lightly, you are spiritually balanced. If it crumples or tears, something is still wrong. If it catches fire, as it did for one unfortunate farmer last spring, you are cursed. You hold your breath, blow, and watch it tremble gently in the breeze. There is a collective sigh of relief. Congratulations, your breath is now officially ecclesiastically approved. But before you can sneak out and enjoy your freedom, the priest ushers you to a bench and begins the reading of the Book of Survival. This is not an actual book. It's more like a running list of local people who got sick and didn't die. Your name is now among them. It's a quiet honor. You listen politely as he reads out a few entries. The woman who coughed up a spoon, the boy who survived after being mistaken for a corpse, The merchant who recovered from a bad oyster and immediately swore off the sea. Your story. Fever, cabbage dreams, minor hallucinations, slots in nicely. Churches in the medieval era often served as not only spiritual centers, but also informal health archives. Monks and priests might record strange illnesses, bizarre recoveries, and curious omens, all loosely documented in marginalia, doodles, or fading scribbles alongside psalms. You're now part of that sacred clutter. After the ceremony, you're allowed to light a candle in thanks. You place it near the altar and whisper something non-committal. Not because you're ungrateful, but because you're still not entirely sure who to thank. The goat? The healer? That one unusually calming rock? Later, at the village square, people begin treating you differently. Not in a dramatic way. No parades or garlands of beet leaves, but with subtle shifts. A longer glance. A slower nod. Someone lets you take the second piece of bread instead of the third. You're not just a person now. You're a person who returned. With this status comes another side effect. People start asking for advice. How did you get through it? What did you eat? Were there signs? Did the garlic really help? You do your best. You give measured answers. You say, mostly I slept, and the leeches were not terrible, but I would not recommend them recreationally. You try not to sound like a prophet, even though you now own 2 amulets and a rock that glows suspiciously at dawn. As twilight falls, you find yourself walking home alone for the first time in days. The wind is brisk. The path is familiar. Your stick taps softly along the stones. The candle you lit earlier flickers behind you, tiny but persistent. And just before you reach your door, you stop. There, crouched in the hedgerow, is a small animal, perhaps a fox, or perhaps just a very angry cat with ambitions. It watches you, unmoving. You feel, for a brief moment, as if the two of you are equals, each having survived something weirder than the other will ever understand. You nod to it. It blinks once, then vanishes. You smile and step inside. Tonight there are no rituals, no feathers, no root-based ointments, just a bowl of warm soup, a blanket that no longer smells like fear, and the soft sound of breathing in a house no longer hushed. You survived. You've returned. And now, the world begins again. By the 12th day, you've recovered just enough to be considered useful again, which is both a compliment and a mild threat. Your mother wakes you by placing a basket in your arms and saying, "You're going to the market. Not would you like to. Not do you feel strong enough." Just the blunt, hopeful assumption that if you can stand upright and point toward cheese, you can haggle over turnips. You don't argue. The walk to the village market is short, but feels epic. Your legs are stronger now, your cough is more of a throat-clearing suggestion, and you haven't seen a hallucinated eel in nearly 3 days. Urine. The market is its usual chaos. Stalls creaking, pigs squealing, a man yelling about miracle onions. You navigate slowly, offering polite nods and the occasional still-breathing shrug. The several villagers stop to pat your shoulder or hand you something oddly specific. A twig of sage, a boiled egg, a dried lizard seat's tail, for continued luck. But you're not just here to shop. You've also been tasked with making an offering exchange, a customary gesture in which someone recently healed gives a symbolic token to another family currently battling illness. It's not a trade of medicine, exactly. Spur, more like a passing of the torch, or in your case a tiny pouch filled with mint, ash, and one of your lesser-used socks. You approach the family sip stall quietly. Their youngest is sick, feverish, sweating, muttering about apples that whisper. You recognize the look. The parents accept your offering with teary gratitude. You say something solemn, like the goat stayed near me. That was a good sign. They nod, as if you've shared ancient wisdom. You feel both awkward and strangely honored. This small ritual, a sick-to-sick offering, wasn't official church doctrine. It wasn't written in books. But across medieval villages, it appeared again and again. Healing was seen not just as an individual victory, but a communal momentum. You carried others forward by showing that survival was possible, even if it came with a limp and a renewed hatred of barley. Then, see you're turning to leave. Someone grabs your arm. It's the local baker's assistant, red-faced and breathless, holding a warm loaf of bread. It's the recovery kind, he says. No leaks this time. You accept it with reverence. The last healing loaf you received was mostly crust and aggressively spicy horseradish. This one is soft, warm, flecked with caraway and gratitude. You tear a piece off and chew slowly. It tastes like victory and possibly fennel. But as you round the last corner toward home, your stomach does something strange, not painful, just suspicious, a bubbling, a shifting, the kind of internal dialogue that says, we remember things you ate during the fever, and we have questions. You hurry home and sit down. Your mother asks if you feel all right. You nod too quickly. She frowns and fetches a cup of digestive tea, which smells of chamomile and whatever the cat dragged in. As evening settles, so does your stomach. Barely, and just in time for what your family calls the Great Purge. This isn't as dramatic as it sounds. It's just a mild laxative, made of dried prunes, mint, and a pinch of regret. To clear the last of the illness, your aunt explains, while stirring it like a potion. And also because you've been eating like a goat on vacation. You drink it. It's terrible. You survive. And as you sit quietly near the fire later, warmed by bread and cautiously bubbling tea, you notice that someone has lit a small candle on your behalf. Just one, placed in a little clay saucer, flickering gently beside a sprig of lavender and your wooden frog charm. Your cousin whispers, "It's for the illness that might come back." So it gets confused and passes by. You like that logic. You nod, and together you watch the flame. No chanting, no leeches. Just soft light, a full belly, and the quiet company of people who've decided, firmly, that you are going to stay well. In the Middle Ages, that was about as close to health care as you could get. Bread, belief, and a house that wanted you to keep living. On the 13th day, someone hands you a rake. You had hoped for another quiet day, maybe sweeping rushes, maybe carving wood shapes with your cousin who insists they're spirit animals. But no, today you are deemed ready for communal work, which in this case means helping with the village latrines. Your enthusiasm vanishes. Latrines in the Middle Ages are, predictably, not glamorous. They are pits, sometimes covered, sometimes not. Occasionally lined with old thatch or stone, but mostly just deep, communal reminders of how unpleasant digestion can be. You're assigned to steam duty. This means dumping ash and herbs into the pit to refresh the balance and keep the spirits of waste from climbing back out. Yes, that's a thing people believe. And after inhaling one lungful of the scent, you decide it might actually be true. The good news? Your sense of smell has returned. The bad news? It returned here. Your partner for the day is a boy named Tovin, who has memorized 17 different kinds of dung. He insists on naming them all. Goat, he says cheerfully, followed by anxious duck. See the angle? You nod. Weakly. But there's purpose in this filth. Latrine maintenance isn't just about sanitation, it's about health prevention. Everyone in the village remembers at least one outbreak traced back to improper pit management. Illness doesn't always wait for winter. Sometimes it shows up after someone tosses a cabbage core too close to the drinking bucket. You work slowly, carefully, and by midday, you're permitted to leave. As you rinse your hands in the stream, you feel both nauseous and oddly triumphant. You have done something disgusting in the service of public wellness, and in a world without soap, plumbing, or germ theory, that makes you a hero. Back at home, you strip off your outer tunic and hang it by the fire. No one asks why it's steaming slightly. Your grandmother gives you a nod of quiet respect and a handful of mint leaves. For chewing, not washing. You accept both the mint and the respect. Later that afternoon, the healer visits again. She sits beside you, opens her satchel, and takes out a crumbling parchment. Time to document the illness, she says. This is her own private habit, a personal record of local sicknesses, cures that sort of worked, dreams worth noting. Shesep's not a doctor, not officially, but Shesep's been keeping this archive since she was 16. Each entry is labeled with the patient SIP's name, symptoms, cure attempts, and one notable incident. Yours reads as follows: name, your name, symptoms, fever, cough, root, hallucinations, cures tried, leeches, onion poultice, vinegar dreams, notable, incident, mistook cabbage for local priest, attempted to confess to it, you try to protest. She silences you with a finger. Truth makes better medicine than pride. She closes the record, ties it with string, and returns it to her satchel. Someday, she says, someone might read these and really understand what we were doing. Historians today still argue whether these kinds of informal records had any lasting impact. Most didn't survive, burned or buried along with their owners. But they offer us a glimpse into a system that, while often bizarre, was built on attention, effort, and the hope that small patterns might someday prevent great disasters. Before leaving, the healer presses a small cloth into your hand. It's Sep's for your pillow, she says. Smells like basil and rain. You sleep well that night. The kind of sleep that comes after labor, laughter, and just the right amount of mint leaf chewing. You dream of being chased by a leech with a monocle, but you outpace it easily. When you wake, the blanket is warm, the fire is low, and your shadow, long and steady in the candlelight, no longer wavers at the edges. You are no longer recovering, you are simply back. By the 14th day, your name is being mispronounced in nearby villages. Not maliciously, just creatively. Word of your return from the deathbed has begun to circulate beyond the hedgerows. Apparently, someone described you as the cabbage prophet, and now there's a rumor that you saw a vision of Saint Apollonia inside a turnip. You try to deny it. But once a story starts rolling in a medieval village, it's like trying to wrestle a greased pig made of gossip. You've been summoned today for something far more permanent than rumor, a stone inscription, not for your gravestone. That would be premature and awkward. No, this is a community marker. A carved stone tablet placed at the village's outer edge, bearing updates about major events, births, marriages, weather disasters, and every so often, miraculous survivals. Your name will be added beneath the last survivor, a woman who recovered from plague after claiming to have made a pact with a weasel. You've got big shoes to fill. The stonemason is already working when you arrive. He's hunched, soot-smudged, and squinting through a fringe of gray hair. He asks for your name. You spell it carefully. He immediately misspells it. You nod anyway. The phrase he carves beneath your name is entirely up to him. You hope for something poetic, maybe even biblical. Instead, he carves, "Rose again after sweating all night." You're too polite to object. Also, you did sweat quite a bit. Stone inscriptions were rare in small villages, but when they appeared, they served as both announcements and warning signs. They didn't just say what happened, they became memory anchors, a visible history for those who couldn't read, but knew how to recognize a symbol or a name, even if that name was slightly wrong. After the carving, there's a brief prayer, muttered by the priest's apprentice, who is mostly focused on sneezing into his sleeve. Then, you're handed a lump of clay to press your thumbprint into. It goes into a small jar, sealed with wax, and tucked into the mason's cabinet beside 10 others. Someday, they might say it was sacred, or cursed, or both. Back in the village square, someone says selling survivor charms. They are just bits of bark, with shapes scratched in. But apparently you inspired them. You receive one as a gift, a lopsided heart surrounded by squiggly lines. You decide to call them Blessed Trembles. That afternoon you are invited to speak at the town gathering, not for long, just a few words. You stand atop a wooden crate that once held onions and clear your throat. You say, "I was warm, then cold, then warm again. Thank you for not burying me prematurely." There is a pause, then polite clapping. One person yells, "Tell the one about the goat again." You do, and somehow it gets more dramatic each time you tell it. By evening, your legs ache again. Not from illness, but from activity. You sit by the hearth, holding the little bark charm, watching your reflection dance faintly in the brass kettle. There's bread, and a stew that's mostly potato this time. You feel like someone who belongs again. Just before bed, the stonemason stops by. He hands you a tiny chip of rock, the one he shaved off when carving your name. "It's tradition," he says. "Keep it by your bed. Protects the next dream." You place it beside the wooden frog, the basil sachet, and the glowing rock from day 9. You're beginning to accumulate a small museum of survival. And maybe that's what recovery really is here. Not just a return to health, but a slow gathering of objects, stories, and scars that remind everyone, yourself included, that you've been through something. And you're still here. On the 15th day, you wake up feeling restless. Not sick, not tired, just itchy in the brain. You've swept, sat, stirred, and told your story more times than you can count. Now what? In a world without books, smartphones, or even reliable chairs, what does a freshly recovered human do with themselves? Simple. You go for a walk with no destination and hope the road has an answer. Your mother notices you lingering near the doorway. She squints. "Don't go to the haunted orchard," she says. You hadn't planned on it. Now you definitely are. You grab your walking stick, a half loaf of turnip bread, and a small pouch of dried peas for throwing at things that need discouraging. Then, you're off. Down the winding path, past the abandoned mill, the rock shaped like a lopsided goose. And finally, the orchard. It's not actually haunted. Probably. But it's old, mostly forgotten, and wildly overgrown. The trees twist in unnatural angles, their branches perpetually clacking together like gossiping crones. No one farms it anymore. The apples there are said to taste like smoke. Perfect place to think. As you sit under one of the gnarled trees, something strange happens. You remember everything, not the dreams, that part's always fuzzy. But the texture of the fever, the moments when you couldn't tell shadow from person, the memory of someone pressing a cool cloth to your neck, though you're still not sure who it was. The certainty you had, for about 8 seconds, that you were made of water and leaking into the floor. And you realize something, you're not the same. not in the dramatic, lightning-struck way, but subtly, quietly. Your knees hurt in different places. Your favorite food now tastes too salty. And for reasons unknown, you've developed an aversion to the color maroon. Post-illness personality shifts were noted in medieval writings, often attributed to humoral imbalances or the lingering influence of heat ghosts, spiritual entities said to swim in your blood during fevers and leave tiny emotional fingerprints behind. You believe it. A little. Later, back at home, your cousin is painting a mural on the side of your house. It's a goat, of course. A frog, also inevitable, and what looks like you, holding a cabbage like it's a sacred relic. It's flattering, confusing, slightly ominous. You help paint a tree in the background. It turns out terribly. Everyone agrees to pretend it's a turnip. That night, as part of your ongoing reintegration, you're invited to the quiet circle, an informal gathering of people who've been through something and aren't quite ready to shout yet. No games, no feasting, just warm drinks and soft questions. Someone asks what you feared most. You say, not waking up. Someone else asks what you remember last. You say, the taste of burnt honey. A third person asks if you think it's simple come back. You shrug. Maybe. But I simple be ready next time with more agreeable socks. Laughter bubbles gently. Someone hands you a woolen cap for future resilience. It sups far too big. You wear it anyway. And just before bed, as you sit by the hearth sipping a weak ale brewed with rose hips and anise, your grandmother says something odd. You simper almost through the third circle. You raise an eyebrow, she explains. First is survival, second is recovery, third is remembrance, and fourth is when you start dancing again, without worrying about it. You think about that. Maybe you're not ready for dancing, but you are ready to walk to the stream tomorrow without counting your steps, or to laugh without checking for chest pain, or to add a little salt back to your porridge without fearing it'll tip your soul out of balance. You've passed through the third circle, or nearly, and now, in the quiet warmth of this small room, filled with flickering light and friends who stopped asking, "Are you all right?" and started asking, "What next?" you realize you don't need to be the same as before. You just need to keep going. By the 16th day, you are, in the eyes of your community, a fully functioning human again, which means it's time to celebrate. Not a grand feast, not a religious festival, nothing requiring special hats or choreographed dances. Just a quiet, joyful, slightly awkward occasion known as the meal of return. It's a local tradition. Every household has their own version, but the idea is simple. The person who was ill gets to choose one meal, eat it slowly, and be treated like someone who matters. Even if all they request is a boiled potato and silence. You're more ambitious. You want cheese porridge with honey, something you last had as a child before your cousin ruined it by declaring it sheep soup. You mention it casually, and your mother's eyes widen, like you've just requested a royal banquet. Cheese and honey, she whispers. By midday, it's underway. Neighbors stop by to offer ingredients. Someone donates exactly 2 almonds. Someone else arrives with half a turnip in case you get nostalgic. A man you've never seen before gives you a single dried fig and leaves without a word. You place it beside the frog charm. It feels appropriate. As the porridge bubbles over the hearth, the room fills with an aroma that somehow smells like comfort and mild defiance. You sit in the honored seat, the one with the cushion, the slightly less broken leg, and the view of the good corner of the ceiling. Everyone watches you. Take the first bite. It's warm, it's lumpy, it's sweet and faintly sour. and tastes exactly like the last time you didn't have to fight for your lungs. You chew slowly, letting each mouthful pull you further away from fevers and dreams. There's clapping. Polite. Polite. Awkward. Each child starts a song that's half lullaby, half vegetable taxonomy. You don't stop them. Then comes the gifting of the utensil. This is tradition. The recovered person is given a small wooden spoon or ladle, carved with a symbol of their choosing. It's meant to signify renewal, nourishment, and oddly enough, stirring one's own fate. Yours is already prepared. A short-handled spoon with a goat, etched on one side and a spiral on the other. The spiral is poorly done, but you appreciate the effort. You raise the spoon. Say something vaguely poetic. To breath, to broth, to bothering death. And everyone raises their own mismatched cutlery in return. Feasts in the Middle Ages weren't just for kings and plagues. Small, domestic rituals like this helped communities feel whole again after illness. They weren't about food. They were about reseating the person who had been removed from the table. Your spot had been empty. Now it's warm again. After the meal, someone insists you do something celebratory. Suggestions are thrown out, a short dance, a funny story, a drawing. You choose drawing. You're handed charcoal and a scrap of wood. You draw a turnip with a very determined face. It's not good, it's not even symmetrical, but it gets a laugh and is promptly declared your healing totem. You hang it near the hearth. Later, when the house is quiet, you sit by yourself and examine the spoon. It's simple, soft-edged, smells faintly of ash and honey. And you think about how strange it is that the same mouth that whimpered, muttered nonsense, and nearly stopped altogether can now say, "More porridge, please," with full clarity. You're here. You're eating. You're not afraid of chewing anymore. You place the spoon beside your other tokens, the frog, the feather, the rock chip, the peppermint leaf folded like a letter. A museum of survival tucked into a corner. And just before you blow out the candle, you whisper the same quiet phrase that got you through your worst night. Still here. Then you sleep, with a full belly and a head no longer filled with fever steam. On the 17th day, your dreams get weird again. Not the fever kind, no vegetable nights or whispering eels, but strange in a different way, calmer, vivid. You dream you're walking through a foggy meadow where every plant hums softly and your breath glows blue. You find a mirror made of ice, and when you look into it, you see yourself, wearing a crown of garlic and blinking in confusion. You wake up feeling oddly peaceful. Maybe the healer was right about the third circle thing. Maybe you're entering the fourth, or maybe that fig you ate yesterday was more fermented than you realized. But you're not the only one dreaming lately. The village has been whispering about visions again. Odd ones. Several people have reported seeing a pale light hovering above the orchard. A child claims to have heard the voice of a cow asking for legal advice. And last night, the carpenter said the stars over his house blinked in Morse code. Naturally, this means one thing. A communal interpretation ceremony. Steffer invited, not as a patient this time, but as a recovered person with residual wisdom. The event is held at the edge of the meadow, where 7 stools and one suspiciously damp log form a loose circle. Each person takes turns sharing their dream, while the rest hum, squint thoughtfully, or nod too often. Your dream, when shared, receives gasps. A glowing breath, says one woman. That sips, a sign of the winter shift. Or a brewing, says the healer, who has brought a teacup for no reason. He might be fermenting. You're not sure what that means, but it sounds impressively mystical. Interpretation ceremonies weren't uncommon in the Middle Ages, especially in communities without formal medicine. Illness and recovery blurred into spirituality, and dreams were believed to hold echoes of what the body couldn't say. A dream wasn't just a dream, it was a diagnosis, a warning, or, occasionally, a request for pie. Your dream is voted most symbolically nourishing. You receive a single baked pear as a prize. It is slightly undercooked and absolutely perfect. After the ceremony, a traveling monk arrives. He's scruffy, wide-eyed, and carries an enormous book full of notes about celestial patterns and goat behavior. He's collecting recovery dreams from around the region and has heard of your cabbage hallucination. He insists on interviewing you, scribbling furiously as you recount the tale of the turnip priest and the leech choir. He nods seriously. You may have touched the outer edge of the fifth humor. You offer him some stew. He declines and eats dried rose petals instead. That evening, the village children reenact your dream with sock puppets. South, one of them is cast as the garlic crown. The production is symbolic and deeply moving. You laugh until your stomach hurts and realize that hurting from laughter is a milestone worth savoring. Afterward, as the sun dips low, the monk gives you a gift, a small scroll with an odd sketch on it. A spiral, a spoon, a frog, and what might be a really confident radish. You're part of the record now, he says. Your dream joins the others. If the stars align and the right goat sneezes at the right time, maybe your cabbage will save someone else. You're too moved to reply, or too baffled. At home, you place the scroll beside your other tokens. You sit quietly, surrounded by artifacts of a journey you never asked for, but somehow survived. Charmed objects, whispered blessings, drawings, dreams. Your room, once just a corner of shared hay and soot, now feels like a shrine to your own resilience. And as you prepare to sleep, you don't worry about coughing or fevers or ghosts of breath past. You just wonder what your dreams will do next. The 18th day arrives with an unexpected guest. Your aunt from 2 villages over. She brings with her a sack of walnuts, a tale about a pig that survived lightning twice, and the firm belief that your recovery is incomplete without a belly-soul harmonization. You had hoped to spend the day lounging near the fire, maybe adding to your growing shrine of survival trinkets. Instead, you're handed a woolen robe, a clove-studded lemon, and told to follow her into the woods. The ceremony takes place in a hollowed-out tree stump, padded with moss and faintly sticky. Your aunt explains that this is where internal confusion is rinsed out through the pores. You nod as if that makes sense. She hands you a tea made from boiled mint, honeycomb, and a sliver of something she calls forest chalk. You sip. It tastes like old pencils and ambition. The harmonization ritual itself is relatively simple. You sit, breathe deeply, hold the lemon to your forehead, and recite a phrase in old village tongue that might translate to either "cleanse me, O gentle gut," or "I reject the shadow of flatulence." You chant anyway, loudly. A squirrel watches, visibly disturbed. Rituals like these, earthy, hyper-local, and suspiciously citrus-focused, were common among isolated communities. While larger towns might rely on monastic medicine or imported herbal wisdom, rural villages had their own lore, a tangled mix of plant knowledge, weather observation, and deep trust in whatever once worked for someone's great-uncle. When the ritual ends, your aunt anoints your belly with walnut oil and declares you reset. You don't feel different, but you do smell vaguely festive. Back home, you're welcomed as if returning from a pilgrimage. Your uncle makes a mild joke about lemon possession, Your cousin asks if you saw any ghosts during the ceremony. You say, "Only the squirrel." Everyone nods solemnly. The squirrel is well known. In the evening, someone begins preparing for a visitation dream. This is a local belief that after harmonization, your next dream may bring you a message from ancestors, spirits, or possibly livestock that have something to say. You're tucked into bed with fresh rushes beneath the mattress, and a small bowl of water placed under your pillow. You sin one noi. You fall asleep quickly, lulled by the scent of lemon, walnuts, and a leftover song someone is humming in the next room. And in your dream, you are walking across a field of bread loaves. The sky is made of beeswax. A goat approaches wearing spectacles and says, "You did well. But don't forget the soup." You wake with a start. You write that down and place the note beside your growing archive. Later, you share the dream with the healer. She nods, then adds a small square of beeswax to her satchel. "Message received," she says. You have no idea what's happening anymore, but you are undeniably part of it. And so you've moved beyond mere recovery. You're entering the realm of ritual resilience. The strange, beautiful place where every sneeze might mean something. Every goat might carry news, and every meal might hold sacred weight. And oddly, it feels right. You don't just belong to the world again. You've been woven back into it, stitched through with story, citrus, and just enough oddity to feel protected. You sleep again that night, with the lemon on the windowsill, the note tucked under your frog, and a sense that, however strange this world is, it has decided to keep you. On the 19th day, someone hands you a feather quill and says, "You're due for reflection. It's not a punishment. It's a rite." The day of writing. A village tradition, rarely spoken of until you're invited to do it. It's simple, quiet, and oddly nerve-wracking. You write a letter to your future self, or in some versions to your deathbed. No pressure. You are given a sheet of rough parchment, a pot of ink that smells faintly of plum, and a bench by the window where the light is optimally symbolic. You're told to write whatever you wish, as long as it's from the soul and not just from the spleen. You're not exactly sure what that means. Still, you begin. At first, it's awkward. You start with "Dear me," then cross it out. To the person who might get sick again, you try. That sticks. You write about the fever, the coughing, the goat, the dreams, the shadow you thought might take you. You mention the turnip hallucinations and the blessed spoon and the way soup began to taste like survival. Then you pause, and you write this line, slowly. If you are reading this, you stir, probably scared. That sep's all right. But also, remember you've done this before. Remember the light by the hearth. Remember the cabbage that forgave you. You're not crying. Exactly. But your eyes are suspiciously watery, and someone nearby is cutting onions. Probably. The healer arrives just as you're drying the ink. She reads your letter without asking for permission, declares it spiritually sound, and folds it into an envelope made from mulberry bark. It's sealed with wax and tucked into a clay jar. Hewer's Sumbol Thoth. You ask, what happens next? Nothing, she says. Unless it happens again. Then we give it back to you. It's one of the more touching customs in a world where healing is rarely linear, and memory is often fleeting. The letter is a breadcrumb trail for your own soul. A map out of the fog, should it ever return. Later, to celebrate your completion, you're invited to join in the clapping circle. An odd but beloved practice, where a group of survivors gather to clap in unison for precisely 93 beats. Why 93? No one knows. But the rhythm, has been passed down for generations. You join, you clap, softly at first, then with growing strength. It feels silly, then meditative, then surprisingly emotional. There's something powerful in shared rhythm, in knowing that your beat is part of something larger, louder, longer. Afterward, you sit by the fire with the other letter writers. You sip warm cider and listen as someone recites an old poem about how breath is a kind of prayer. Someone else shares their letter aloud. It ends with the line, "Next time, hide the leeches better." That gets a round of chuckles. One person claps again. Just once. You go to bed, feeling strange, lighter. Yes, but also like you've left a part of yourself on that parchment. And maybe that sips the point. In the darkness, with your tokens beside you, you whisper, if you sim reading this again someday, hey, you made it once. The frog doesn't reply, but you feel heard. The 20th day opens with mist rising from the fields and a stillness that feels almost sacred. No chores are assigned. No visitors arrive. No goats wander indoors, which might be the clearest sign that today is different. You are alone, briefly, and the quiet wraps around you like an old familiar blanket, scratchy but warm. Today is for the final ritual. Not a public one, not a feast, not a dramatic return. Just something simple, private, and softly profound, the hanging of the token. You gather your collection. The spoon, the frog, the bark charm, the stone chip, the feather, the scroll, with the goat in spectacles, the now faded drawing of the dream turnip, the letter in its wax-sealed jar, each one strange, lovely, and quietly ridiculous in its own right. Together, they tell your story, not in perfect words, but in perfect feeling. With twine, bark string, and cautious balance on a three-legged stool, you tie them together and hang the bundle above your bed. Not to forget, but to remember, gently. This act of hanging tokens was common in many medieval homes, especially among those who'd endured illness, war, famine, or other brushings with death. The objects weren't charms exactly. They weren't meant to ward off danger. They were meant to witness that it had come, and passed, and left you standing. You step back and look at your crooked creation. It creaks slightly in the breeze from the window, casting lopsided shadows on the wall. It's ugly, beautiful, yours. The rest of the day is slow. You help patch a hole in the roof. You rewrap dried herbs. You share tea with the healer, who only half listens as you describe a new dream. This one with a snail wearing a crown made of cheese rinds. She nods. That's a good one. Snails are patient. Royal patience is rare. That night, a storm rolls in. Not a loud one. Just rain and wind tapping at the shutters. You lie in bed, watching your token bundle sway slightly. The frog bumps the spoon. The scroll rattles. The feather floats. And you feel it, that final slow exhale of the long recovery. The sense that something has finished. You're no longer someone who was sick. You're just someone who lived. Not stronger, not wiser, but here. You turn on your side, pull the blanket high, and let your breath lengthen. No fire needed tonight. No prayers, no chants. Just the soft rhythm of rain, the steady beat of your own body, and 1,000 invisible threads tying you quietly to the world. As your eyes close, the last thought in your head is simple. It's good to be back. And so the candle burns low. The fire, already faint, flickers into quiet ash. Outside, the storm has softened into drizzle. Just the occasional drip from eaves, the gentle shuffle of wind between trees. Inside your body, peace spreads slowly. Muscles let go. inch by inch. Breath becomes velvet. Thought trails dissolve into mist. You are no longer walking, working, or worrying. You are floating, loosely tethered to a world that finally holds still. And somewhere, just above you, the tokens sway, a small reminder that you came through something and are allowed now at last to rest. Sleep takes you gently, as it always should, with no fever, no fear, just breath and warmth and the hush of being home.